It's day 2 of Ohio State football's fall camp preparing for the 2024 regular season. I'm Stephen Means. That's Andrew Gillis. And we were out there once again for the full practice, 15 periods. We're talking defense. We talked with Jim Knowles after today's practice. Andrew, what's the most interesting thing that Ohio State's defensive coordinator Jim Knowles talked about?
Well, when you look at Ohio State's defense, I said this, yesterday when I was watching the defense, they're just so good and they're so top heavy and they're so experienced that you kind of know. And, he mentioned CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles are kind of neck and neck. He didn't really kind of expand on that. He just kind of mentioned that, you want to see till the pads get on and things like that. But I think that led me to a more longer term kind of outlook and something that he talked about, and that was the jack position. It's something that Ohio State fans are well aware of. It's something that everybody that follows Ohio State football knows. This is a conversation every year because Jim Knowles brought the jack from Oklahoma State. He shows up with it, and no pun intended, they didn't name it after Jack Sawyer, but they tried to use Jack Sawyer. It didn't really work in Jack Sawyer's first year under Jim Knowles. That wasn't really kind of what made him go. So they don't have it now. And he mentioned this, well, who are you going to take off the field? You got Jack Sawyer, you got JT Tuimoloau, you got Tyleik Williams, you got Ty Hamilton. You're not taking one of those guys off the field. And he said, if anything, we're going to go the other way. If anything, we're going to add another defensive lineman onto the field because behind them, you've got Kenyatta Jackson, you've got Caden Curry, you've got a host of interior guys. He specifically mentioned Caden McDonald today. They've got a lot of defensive line talent. And yes, he feels like they can play the jack. He mentioned that there are guys that they have, but who are you going to take off the field, right? And that, I think, is a very interesting conversation because we've talked about this a lot in recruiting, Stephen, with the Justin Hill recruitment. They were recruiting Justin Hill, a 4-star player, top 60, I think it was at the time. I think he's still that. Top 60 overall player. He just fits the jack perfectly. He's exactly what Ohio State wants the jack position to be, and he commits to Alabama over Ohio State. And one of the things that is very hard to do is how can you recruit the jack if you don't play the jack? But how can you play the jack if you don't recruit the jack? So it's a very interesting kind of dynamic there, and I'm kind of fascinated to see how this goes moving forward because Arvell Reese could be an option. They were talking about CJ Hicks playing off the line. Like, is he a guy that you can maybe play in that type of role where he blitzes off the edge, he can drop in coverage, he can do a couple of different things. The jack position is very interesting to me because you've got great defensive linemen. You've got Larry Johnson, who's bringing in, more traditional kind of 4-down linemen. And how does that dynamic work this season? Because if you want it to work this season, you probably would like to be able to show it on film to recruits. And it's this just never-ending cycle of that. And like one of the things that Justin Hill told me at, actually right over there, was that when he came for a visit, one of the things Ohio State showed him was Oklahoma State and Duke film. And I know that Ohio State would love to be able to show jack film from the Buckeyes from this time, not before COVID, right? That's something that you want to be able to show. So the jack position, very interesting to me. And I think that long-term is probably the most interesting thing that he talked about today.
Knowles talked about it like there are guys on the roster he knows can play it. It's just they don't necessarily need it right now when you do have defensive ends like Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau and Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, Mitchell Melton.
Yeah.
Right, when you've got the talented defensive line room, you probably can't take those guys off the field, which means it does make it a future conversation. I've got 2 things. It's because I got the mic and I can do that. The first thing I think was interesting was he said the nickel depth worries me.
Yes.
And part of it is Lorenzo Styles is an active participant in practice, but he's not full go. In fact, I saw him today. I think he had a non-contact jersey, at least tucked in his pants. He wasn't necessarily wearing it. And anytime they did something competitive, he was just doing conditioning drills off to the side. Jim Knowles even admitted he's coming back from an injury, so that's hitting your depth there. So they're just trying guys there. Jermaine Matthews has been working it with the 2s. He said Denzel Burke has been working it there. Jordan Hancock's at that spot. So what happened? Sonny Styles left the room as your nickel, and now you're looking for other options there. And so I pulled Jim Knowles to the side after he got done with his 15-minute press conference, and I said, so is this going to be like similar to last year, really? I know Sonny Styles is in the linebacker room, but he can still play that Sam role if you're trying to get the 3 linebackers on the field. So I am wondering if in this situation, last year we saw Sonny Styles just be the starter. Maybe this year Jordan Hancock is the starter, and depending on personnel, you've got those 3 linebackers out there, Sonny Styles as your Sam, Cody Simon as your Mike linebacker and CJ Hicks as your Will. But when it's just two linebackers, what does it look like? As you mentioned, he said CJ and Sonny are neck and neck. What's the snaps look like when it's two linebackers? Because it sounds like they want to play all three a lot this year. And the other thing was more about a Jim Knowles philosophical conversation. When he first got here in 2022, he was known as this aggressive play caller. In fact, if you guys remember against Notre Dame, his first play call as Ohio State's defensive coordinator, he sent Denzel Burke on the blitz. Now, it burned him, right? And it's how we found out Josh Proctor wasn't the guy at safety that Lathan Ransom was. But it burned him a couple of other times late in the season against Michigan, late in the season against Georgia. And it felt like he backed off of that and got a little bit more conservative with things. And it burned him anyway, right? He brought up the Missouri game and not being able to get off the field in that game and not being as aggressive. The Michigan game, those last couple of drives where they couldn't get off the field. So this year, year 3, you've got a lot of guys who have played a lot of snaps in this defense. What does that mean from a play caller's perspective and finding that right balance of when to be aggressive, when to be conservative, how the game dictates that? Because he did admit we have to be more aggressive in those matchup games, which is where that matters. It doesn't matter the first 3 weeks of the season. It's going to matter against Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, and whenever you get on the playoff stage. I'm Stephen Means. That's Andrew Gillis. Get the text 614-350-3315. That's practice number 2. Of like 20 plus more before they play a college football game. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that, 614-350-3315. And go listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts.